Alright, I've recently watched and binged the entirety of the MCU's Daredevil, which is for all intents and purposes a great show. I wouldn't say it's the best show ever made, not even in its own genre type. Penguin, which if you've not seen it, it's basically a must-watch if you like gritty crime thrillers. But just because the Penguin is a lot better doesn't change Daredevil still being a great show. I just want to talk about it in general while also talking about one dilemma that keeps recurring throughout the series that, to be honest, really annoys me a little bit. But we'll get into that soon after we go through a basic rundown of Daredevil. Alright, so Daredevil. It's basically an underdog story where a normal dude named Matthew Murdock, aka Daredevil, decides to take the safety of his corrupt and crime-struck home called Hell's Kitchen into his own hands. So pretty much your typical superhero/vigilante story, but a lot more serious. No one-liners, no banter, just pain, hope, and straight hands. Except in season 2 where the plot got way too weird with some old ancient shadowy ninja organization. But besides that, everything else is pretty goated. It's hard for me to put in words, but the writing and vibe of this show is just amazing. It's more of a crime thriller mixed with bits of superhero DNA. And its writing is definitely its strongest suit. In fact, I don't think I explained it well enough. Well, I did, but I didn't really get the why of the show across, you know? I'll now explain it from the lens given to us by the show as best as I can. The world of Daredevil is not really all that different from our own. In fact, it hits more close to home than we'd like to admit. Filth, drugs, human trafficking, murder, things that are no stranger to reality reeks through all of Hell's Kitchen. What makes it worse isn't the fact that crime is so rampant and high in quantity across the place. It's also the quality of control it has in terms of sheer power across it as well. The crime syndicates here, even though far more incredibly secretive and elusive, are pretty much just as or even more powerful than the Mafia was back in the 1940s. They have control over basically anything they desire, from cops or the press. But the top of the crime syndicate in Daredevil, just like their real-world counterparts, didn't just get their view up the ladder by being completely reckless and cartoonishly evil. No, they of course had to prioritize profits to attain that level of influence and keep it. And crime did pay. So they kept smuggling drugs and people alike because the more they do so, the more unstoppable they became. A reinforcing dark cycle that might just never end. You could say all you want, but at the end of the day, they were rewarded by the cold indifference of the universe for doing what they were doing. After all, capitalism isn't exactly known for its moral high ground. So then why does it matter if men, women or children are kidnapped or if murders take place? It all can be covered up cheaply enough to put bread covered in golden flakes on the table. Who exactly is gonna stop them? Nobody who wants to help can possibly topple the crime syndicate, even if they wanted to legally. They bribe or threaten judges and officers of the law after all. And those of the ultra wealthy who possibly could do something couldn't care less. After all, they didn't exactly become wealthy by being some sanctimonious fools who cared enough for the crooks who are too lazy to move or live anywhere else. Just because you can't move anywhere else because you decided to be born deficit of cash isn't their problem after all. Even if they probably are the ones who got the surplus part of the deal at your expense. But no, that isn't too much of a concern. After all, the ones fed with golden spoons aren't the ones that are gonna be waiting for you inside your own home late one night. The criminal world and its corrupt influence is so strong in Hell's Kitchen that it makes the name truly fitting. In fact, maybe the universe isn't as cold as we thought. Maybe it does observe and react as fate. As only fate could explain, how of all places in this vast world we call home, a place by the name of Hell's Kitchen is the only one that holds the devil. Now, this is the core reason why Daredevil is as good as it is. They don't hesitate to show us how truly powerless everyone is in front of the influence of the criminal world, as anyone who dares to do so are risking their very lives for an uphill battle that is, from a cold probability standpoint at least, probably harder than winning the lottery. Now, that was a much more long-winded explanation, but I think I did explain it as well as I could without outright showing the entire show. And obviously, even then, I'm not done explaining it. Sure, I've explained the general plot and what the show is about, but all I've basically described is a show. I need you to know that it's a good one, and you can't have a good show without having a good villain. Now, it doesn't take a genius to guess that the main villain of a show about taking on the crime syndicate in Hell's Kitchen is probably the head of that crime syndicate. But it does take one to predict just how well the villain would fit the role. Wilson Fisk, the man behind it all, the man who shall not be named. He was so feared in the underworld that when professional mercenaries said his name when they weren't supposed to, they'd rather brutally off themselves than face what Fisk would have in store for them. So obviously that should speak for itself. He's capable of both being kind and ruthless, manipulative and cunning, or be a pillar of strength when required. He's a complex character that's definitely worthy of holding the mantle of Kingpin, topped off by Vincent's embodiment of him, which almost mimics how good Colin Farrell was as the Penguin, and you have the makings of a solid villain that needs no less than Daredevil's best to handle. And there you go, that's the best rundown I can give for now. Now that we are all caught up to speed, I think it's finally time to talk about that dilemma from the beginning. Now you see, even though Wilson Fisk isn't necessarily the strongest dude out there, he has tremendous influence over the city through his connections and wealth accumulated through his ventures with crime. So if he has a goal in mind, he'll do whatever it takes. So needless to say, this isn't a guy even Daredevil can handle easily, both metaphorically and literally. Now here is where we run into a problem. Now to take down Fisk, the simplest and most common route pretty much all cliche superheroes use is the classic lock 'em up trick, which also usually has the cliche villain breaks out problem. In Daredevil, this is no different, but unlike Batman, who pretty much lets Joker kill at least like 20 people before throwing him in jail to repeat the same shtick again, Daredevil being written to pretty much have an actually functioning prefrontal cortex is aware of the problem. So this is where we run into the dilemma, the debate between Daredevil and the Punisher in Season 2. This debate is the reason why I'm even making this video. Both Daredevil and the Punisher are basically two sides of the same coin. They both are vigilantes who fights crime, but here's the difference. Daredevil believes that it's wrong to kill criminals while the Punisher believes that it's right to do so. And it seems like both of them have actually valid points. The Punisher thinks it's right to do so because it would permanently end the problem, as the criminals simply won't be capable of reoffending their crimes ever again, which is much more likely than someone innocent committing a crime. After all, most murders committed are probably by the same people. Meanwhile, Daredevil does acknowledge that it's possible that they might reoffend, but also acknowledges that there's a chance of redemption, that they might regret their actions and decide to actually turn their lives around. Now normally, if there wasn't any more context to this debate, it isn't wrong to say that there isn't a clear winner here. Both sides are pretty subjective and take certain priorities more seriously than the other, and thus don't see eye to eye on it. Pretty peak writing, yeah, I'm gonna keep it a buck. Even though the rest of Season 2 sucks, any part that included the Punisher, any part, was pretty top tier. Especially his section of the season, which is like the first 4 episodes. It's Daredevil straight up at its best. If you didn't feel anything after he talks about his family and what happened to them, you have to be a skinwalker pretending to be a human. There's no shot you aren't. But back on track. I know I said that it isn't wrong to say that there isn't any strong winner in the debate, but that changes fast when context is involved. In the situation Daredevil is in and knows he's in, he knows he has to kill Fisk. Even the show unsubtly kept constantly telling him that he has to complete the job.
There's only one way to stop him, you'll know this.
You're still afraid to cross that line. Someday it's gonna come down to you or the other guy.
Like I've stated before, in the condition Hell's Kitchen is in, it's basically impossible to keep Fisk in prison. And considering he isn't exactly a cute little puppy that can't do any harm, he's more closer to a ticking time bomb the moment he does escape. Spoiler alert, surprisingly he does. That too, it's fair to say the damage he caused in Season 3 is way worse than Season 1, as he caused an entire massacre and more. The entirety of Season 3 is literally Daredevil being confronted by the truth the hard way, and by the end of it, Daredevil was fully straight up considering it, yet he still doesn't by the end of that either. If he simply had actually killed Fisk in the first season, then there wouldn't be a Season 3 or God forbid an entire new series. Season 2 would have been the end of the series, which like I mentioned earlier, it was peak in the beginning with the Punisher, but everything else was completely ass. Okay, I do still stand by that Season 2 is definitely the worst season among all of them, but I think I'm flaming it a little too hard here, considering that the worst thing in the series didn't happen in Season 2. The worst thing in the entire series without question happened in Season 1. This one thing, or one moment to be more exact. If you know, you know. There isn't even much more to say about this besides it being the biggest face of a character in the entire series without question. I'm just gonna leave it at that, because otherwise the more I think about it, the more likely it is that I'm going to probably spend the rest of the entire video talking about how much of a shitty moment it is. In just this one moment, the worst character assassination and the biggest face of a character of the entire series is done all in order to serve a shitty plot contrivance that's done to keep the show short. Okay, I'm gonna stop thinking about this because the more I do, the more likely it is that I'm going to find the writer's address and send a tactical nuke on his ass. But that heavy fumble aside, the main point I was making earlier was that if Daredevil just did what he should have, Season 2 would have been the last season. Even if it's supposed to. The entire series would have just wrapped up since Season 3 is literally just Fisk breaking out of prison. And the new series Born Again is about Fisk becoming mayor after recovering from an incident or something. They still haven't given an explanation of how he got out of prison again and what exactly happened to injure him. I tried looking up what happened, but apparently screw the breaking out of prison part. Fisk got shot in the head. Apparently in the Hawkeye show, a show I didn't watch because God forbid I miss out on any one of the 6 days worth of content that I gotta catch up on to get to know what's going on in one random show that I was interested in, the MCU. The main villain or something along those lines included Fisk, who at the end got shot in the dope. And apparently the Hawkeye show takes place like 7 years after Daredevil Season 3. Now, how did he get out again? Or why wasn't Daredevil involved? Well, apparently he made an appearance, but that's about it. I guess he doesn't care about Fisk or something at the time. But how did this strong but obviously very normal dude survive a point-blank shot to the head? I literally have no clue. I guess screw what I said earlier about killing him, because maybe Fisk is like immortal or something, or maybe he's fat as ate the goddamn bullet, I don't know. Okay, so small important note, after making most of the script I finally know what happened with the injury, but I'll explain it later when I talk about Born Again more thoroughly. Please excuse me, but hold on. Before we move on, we still have to address some things about the Punisher, which raises some questions. Besides being one of the founding fathers of this debate, he's pretty much the deadliest dude in the show, ignoring the ninjas from Season 2 or whatever. He was obliterating criminals so bad that Daredevil basically had to swap sides and protect the criminals like they were civilians from him. And obviously he's the type to empty skulls and take retribution into his own hands directly. So then that begs the question, if he really is all that, he really is that guy and all, and proudly proclaims he knows what needs to be done, why didn't he take care of Fisk? In Season 1, it makes sense why he didn't kill Fisk. He wasn't the Punisher at the time. And in Season 2, it also made sense, since after their scuffle in prison, they both basically agreed to leave each other be for the time being. as Fisk would rather have the Punisher destroy his competition outside of prison, while the Punisher didn't mind the offer of getting released from prison since it's not exactly like the prison had more criminals inside of it than outside. So they both decided to stay out of each other's way for the time being. But however, in season 3, when the Kingpin is basically out, where the hell was the Punisher? It's not like season 2 where it was just more wiser to avoid each other. They both should have been on a direct collision course just like Daredevil and Fisk. But no, instead the Punisher was completely missing from the entirety of the season. And you know what, I'm gonna keep my words short since it's pretty obvious why it isn't elaborated on. This is definitely the second worst writing mistake besides James Wesley. The writers know if they included the Punisher in any shape or form in season 3, this could have been turned into Swiss cheese. Even without Daredevil, the Punisher would stomp the hell out of Fisk. Like I said earlier, the Punisher is straight up the deadliest dude in the series. The thing is, he already hand-to-hand combat-wise is as good as Daredevil is. But unlike Daredevil who uses a bunch of separated nunchucks or something, the Punisher is a true American patriot. He's not afraid to use the blick. And what makes it even worse is we already basically have confirmation of how a fight between Fisk and Punisher would go. Like I said, in season 2 they had a tussle, and it seems like the Kingpin had a slight lead over him, when both of them have 0 weapons. After the Punisher fought like 10 different dudes with weapons straight up with his bare hands. So yeah, I think it's pretty fair to say how an encounter with a fully strapped, uninjured Punisher and Fisk would go. It's obvious, in fact. It's so obvious the writers just straight up refuse to write about it. Which to me at least, even if it's the lack of writing, still counts as the second worst writing mistake besides James Wesley, which takes the crown without question. Unlike Matthew, Fisk is not getting renewed for another season if the Punisher gets a hold of him. And to be honest, as great of a hero Matthew is, beating bad guys up, saving people, and all that good stuff, he's basically just broke Batman? I know that might seem like a joke, but it's kinda true. Both are vigilantes that fight at night, I think. Daredevil doesn't come out when the sun's out, right? Both of them have an annoying no-kill rule and have an internal nemesis because of it. And they don't like jokes, I think, and they're both kinda emo and you know what? I don't think I'm doing a good job here. Just roll the clips, bro.
Where is he? Where is he? Where are they? Where is he? Where's the catnip?
If you're trying to scare somebody, pick a better spot. From this height, foe wouldn't kill me.
I'm counting on it. It'd be a shame for you to have to watch what they do to
Yeah, as you can see, both of them definitely share the same wavelength. And another weird hyper-specific similarity they have is that both of them have to put up against a shadowy organization once in a while. Which, to be honest, suits Batman a lot better than it does Daredevil, since over-the-top stuff like that just doesn't mesh well with the realistic, gritty tone that Daredevil has. After all, he's basically just a normal dude. Unlike Batman, who's more Batman than he is Bruce Wayne, Daredevil is actually more Matthew Murdock than just Daredevil. You look kinda confused. Okay, if you don't get what I mean, let me explain it more properly. Just stick with me here. Often in the superhero genre, superheroes conceal their identities for their own reasons, whether it be important or trivial. So often these heroes like Batman, Spider-Man, or the Man of the Hour Daredevil can be visualized like a coin. I'm using the coin example a lot today, ain't I? One side being their superhero slash vigilante side, and the other their normal public identity, which is usually a really good problem they have to face. This is not only handled well in Daredevil, it's especially shown in the case of Spider-Man, who pretty much has to deal with consequences 24/7 in his personal relationships due to it. Since he pretty much doesn't have enough hours in a day to perfectly be both Peter and Spider-Man, often being Spider-Man cuts a lot of time he was supposed to use for his friends, family, studies, and even job while studying. So yeah, Spider-Man got his hands full. Both Spectacular Spider-Man and Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man shows, for example, shows you this instead of telling you. Both are solid shows, by the way, if you want to watch something Marvel related. Alright, but let's get back on track. Spider-Man's coin doesn't lead one way or another. He's both Spider-Man and Peter. Both sides are just as real and important as the other. Meanwhile, in the case of Batman or Bruce Wayne, both sides exist, but however, there's one side that is actually more dominant, or to put it simply, the real side, which is the Batman part. And the reason why I say this is because while Batman is basically his true self, he basically pretends to have the Bruce Wayne persona or whatever to keep up appearances, to not let people know that he's actually Batman by doing things which make him look like your average rich playboy publicly who doesn't care deeply about things like crime. Even though still, if we're being real, anyone who probably puts in like, I don't know, 3 Google searches would probably find out Bruce Wayne is Batman. And I know this is kinda off topic, but I gotta rant about this. Like, let's be real here. The candidate pool for Batman is so limited. I mean, even playing devil's advocate here, by saying that simply because we know that Batman is rich, doesn't necessarily mean we know how rich he is, which means he could be a billionaire or even just a millionaire. Just a million. Which, if it's the latter, would increase the amount of candidates who fit Batman by probably a couple thousand. Now, this is a pretty stupid take, to put it lightly. Like, let's take that debate seriously. First of all, if you've ever even glanced at the Batmobile, you know he can't be just a millionaire. Even in real life, there are cars that take multiple millions of dollars to purchase, let alone some random custom job that puts men's 13-in-1 shampoo including motor oil to shame. This shit can jump, boost, rotate on the spot, smash through objects, fire missiles, can fly, is completely bulletproof, and can even go invisible. Like, even if, let's just say, you don't know all that, you probably know that shit is bulletproof regardless, because that shit is being shot at least 40% of its entire mileage. But fuck all of that. If you honestly look at this and don't think that shit is at least worth 3 generations worth of my whole family tree, there's something wrong with you. But if that's not enough for you, you don't want to hear, no, this looks like or sounds like it's expensive. No, you want the actual price. You know what? Let's show the real life value of it. And yes, if you didn't know, it does technically exist. The Batmobile from the Dark Knight series isn't just a prop, but an actual vehicle. Of course, from the last time I checked, I don't think it fires missiles or anything, but it's still technically the real deal. And even then, without the ability to shoot missiles, it costs $3 million to buy. Like, there's no way you think a low-tier millionaire could buy this. But let's ignore all of that and just say he could still be a low-end millionaire. But this still doesn't change how the other details, like him having the exact same build, height, and chin, which is for most versions of Batman fully exposed, by the way, and I don't care how silly that is, that's gotta account for way more than it sounds. And then the final nail in the coffin, over a period of time, the amount of bruises and ass whoopings he's received can't all be just ignored. After a while, someone would obviously notice. Hell, even the writers point this out. Okay, I don't know why I ranted this much about something pretty much everyone knows. Like, obviously, comics that are mostly targeting children aren't gonna have the best explanations for stuff like this. Like, at least for Batman, they at least try explaining how he keeps it a secret. Meanwhile, they just didn't give a shit for Superman. Okay, let's just get back on track. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, Batman's coin. So in Batman's case, he's Batman, sometimes pretending to be Bruce Wayne, the playboy. Meanwhile, in the case of Daredevil, unlike Batman, who is more Batman than Bruce, and Spider-Man, who is a balance of both, Daredevil is actually Matthew sometimes being Daredevil. The reason why being that Matthew actually tries taking down people like Fisk directly through legal cases as himself. He actually tries putting them behind bars if he can, and he straight up has done it twice to Fisk. And I'm pretty sure if Hell's Kitchen simply wasn't as corrupt as it was, and Matthew could actually use the law to defend his home more permanently, he actually would never have put on the horns in the first place. He only does it because he needs to. Often, if he can't find something to use against a man like Fisk conventionally as Matthew the lawyer, which there's plenty since he isn't exactly a billionaire, he simply uses Daredevil to get what he needs by force. So yes, he's basically the opposite of Batman in that regard. Daredevil is Matthew, who has to be Daredevil from time to time to get what he needs to defend his home from day-to-day crimes. Meanwhile, Batman could theoretically end crime in a city as Bruce Wayne without ever needing to be Batman in the first place. But I guess Bruce Wayne systematically lowering crime rates and corruption through his financial influence probably just wouldn't sell as well as mentally damaged orphan with a costume who for whatever reason knows every sort of violent martial art you need to beat up random low-tier crooks who probably couldn't feed their families any other way. Like, think about it. Those crooks aren't born yesterday. They probably heard of the 30-piece combos their co-workers have tasted through every orifice in their body. Yet they still pull up. Why? Because crime pays in Gotham. But he could pretty much single-handedly stop that, but of course he'd rather just cave people's skull in more. Guess it's just too cathartic to let go, right? I mean, well, that unintentionally does explain why he takes the no-kill rule so seriously, I guess. He's already itching to beat people's craniums into pieces as it is, so if he kills one person, he's just gonna think, hey, I've already killed one, might as well double it since it's fun. Yeah, so we done with the random tangent about a random tangent. Yeah, both Batman and Daredevil are built on a similar template but differ on one condition. Batman is a normal dude without superpowers who's ultra wealthy, but who doesn't use his wealth for good. Meanwhile, Daredevil is a normal dude who is broke in comparison to Batman, so does whatever he can for good. And yes, Daredevil is basically just a normal dude.
No, I'm not trying to be a hero. I'm just a guy that got fed up with men like you and I decided to do something about it.
I know he got super senses, which basically replace his eyesight with more pros than cons, like being able to fight people better with these weird senses, have hearing good enough to hear people through walls, and use it to even catch someone lying from their heartbeat, which in my opinion is kind of a BS ability, to be honest. I mean, you don't even really gotta think that hard to understand that it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like, if you ask someone who just escaped a burning building if there's someone else inside, unless they intentionally burn down the house themselves just so that they could get their heart rate up to cover them lying, I don't think their high heart rate necessarily means that they're lying. Kinda sounds like that body language stuff, which is basically total nonsense.
Please just tell me these tapes aren't going to be given out like candy so those fucking true crime channels can make a breakdown of it. Because I already know they'll say some shit about how I blinked the wrong way and how it means I'm a sociopath or something.
The suspect is a prick.
If you don't think so, you should try watching this vid afterwards. But I mean, who knows? Not everyone can casually check a person's heart rate every day. I know I don't. So Daredevil probably got it. It's a nitpick anyway. Alright, what were we talking about? Alright, he's got super senses that allows him to fight people better than your average Joe. But besides that, he doesn't actually have any enhanced abilities like super strength or anything. He's just a normal dude, which is why you often see him getting his ass beat by other regular dudes. Yeah, some of them are professional assassins or whatever, but that doesn't change the fact that they're still normal people. Like, he literally got folded by an old man with a regular ass taser. You are never gonna see something like that happen to any other superhero. Which, speaking of superheroes, the Daredevil show does canonically take place in the MCU, which is almost kind of hard to believe. The entire vibe of the show is so different from the rest of the MCU that if you're like me, you might just straight up forget that it belongs in the same universe as people like Spider-Man and Iron Man. In fact, it's actually straight up odd how much of a lack of presence there is from other superheroes in the show. There's like 1 or 2 mentions of the Avengers in total in the entire show. It's not like the rest of the superheroes are like far away or something. Pretty much all of them are in the United States. And that too in New York. The Avengers headquarters is literally a 15-minute drive away from Hell's Kitchen. Hell, they kinda even acknowledge this with Daredevil making an appearance in other shows, including Spider-Man No Way Home. But let's keep it a buck. It would have been more useful if it was the opposite. I mean, like, what possibly could a blind man who's getting folded by a taser do to help a kid who's fought actual Avengers? Meanwhile, the main villain of Daredevil is literally a Spider-Man villain. Well, I didn't elaborate on this earlier, but if you're like me, when I said Wilson Fisk is the main enemy of Daredevil, you might have asked, isn't that just a Spider-Man villain? Well, yeah, he's just a Spider-Man villain. Which to me is actually crazy. Like, imagine debating with your friend about who's the best superhero and picking Daredevil. Like, how the hell could you defend Daredevil when his villain, his main villain, is basically borrowed from another hero who has other villains who are just as good or straight up better than Fisk is? Dr. Octopus, Green Goblin, or God forbid Venom are all way above Kingpin in Spider-Man's arch-enemy list. I'd say Kingpin is barely in the top 5 of like Spider-Man villains if I'm being kind. Meanwhile, he is Daredevil's main villain. Like, you just can't compare Daredevil and Spider-Man with a straight face. But hey, like they say, comparison is the thief of joy, right? Just because Spider-Man is technically way stronger than Daredevil doesn't change the fact, to me at least, besides not being show which I would say is completely better in terms of enjoyment, the Daredevil show is way better than the MCU Spider-Man stuff because of how much more real it feels. But still, that doesn't change the fact that Spider-Man still lives like a couple blocks away in Queens, which is like a 30-minute drive away. So funny enough, Spider-Man is still more qualified to take down Fisk than Daredevil is. But what makes it even funnier is that Spider-Man is not even the hero with the best matchup against Fisk. Think about it. We already know what makes Fisk powerful is his wealth and influence, which allows him to manipulate the cops and courts of Hell's Kitchen. So if, I don't know, a superhero who happens to be, like, hypothetically speaking, richer than Batman got wind of what was going on in Hell's Kitchen, which, like I said, is like a 15-minute drive from Avengers headquarters, I think he might be able to do something about it. But if you're being honest, Iron Man, just like Batman, probably wouldn't use his financial power and influence to stop Fisk. No, he'd probably just ask Jarvis to pull up his IP address and blast his ass, which would still be 1,000 times better since Fisk would at least stay dead. Because unlike another mentally traumatized orphan, Iron Man has no such thing as a no-kill rule. He'd actually stay dead and be a problem to Hell's Kitchen no longer. So Iron Man would blitz Fisk in one episode, no questions asked, regardless of method. I guess it's pretty sad that wait, is this a spoiler? I haven't really even considered this before, but it's something like a... You know what, I'll take no chances here. Massive spoiler for Avengers Endgame incoming. Is Iron Man's death still a spoiler? I mean, I guess it actually makes more sense now, since the hype has died down, and now for new people entering the series, if they are, which considering how popular the MCU has been recently, would be a kinda surprising. But still, there might be like one new Gen Alpha, Beta, Gamma, whatever person in the future who might unironically want to consume the continent-sized amount of content the MCU has. So I guess, yeah, wow. I mean, it makes sense, but I just for some reason can't picture someone in the future binging the MCU in order from the beginning. It's probably because even people who used to watch the MCU and actually know a thing or two, but just don't care about all of the TV shows or whatever they're making, like they might like 1 or 2 shows, me, but don't care about the rest. But now suddenly, to watch 1 or 2 shows, I need to watch another TV show which there was no actual clarification of. You just gotta luckily watch the specific show that gives context about the show you want to watch, otherwise you'll just never know what's going on, I guess. Look, I'm not saying this about all the MCU shows. While the new Born Again show can almost be used as a textbook example of this problem, as you basically need to know details from 2 other shows which I'll talk about in a bit, but not now. The first 3 seasons of Daredevil actually don't suffer from this problem. Hell, I kind of wish it straight up wasn't in the MCU because of all the stuff I mentioned earlier about how obsolete the other heroes would make the show. Basically, any superhero okay with killing would have probably ended Daredevil in season 1, if not the first episode. And no, I'm not even gonna consider season 2 at this point. That ninja stuff was a bit too much, and I bet even the writers knew they messed up, because they straight up never mentioned the stuff again. Neither in season 3 nor the new one, if I'm not wrong. But that being said, it's not too much of a biggie since he didn't kill Fisk. We got a couple more seasons of Daredevil, which was still great. That being said, I'm not so sure if I'm gonna continue watching the new series. Look, the new series isn't bad. The White Tiger stuff was good. The bank robbery episode was my favorite. Pretty much everything was on point in that episode. The dialogue, the writing, the villain were all top tier. But all that praise aside, it kind of feels like they just wanted to bring Daredevil back, not necessarily because they actually have a new proper story worth telling with them, like season 3. No, they brought him back just because he's popular. That's just how I feel about it, at least. And another weird thing I've seen people say is that you can just start watching from the new series Born Again without watching the original. And I'm gonna immediately say that's just bullshit. And I get to say that because that is actually what I did. I watched the first like 4 episodes of Born Again first, then the original 3 seasons, then the remaining episodes of Born Again after, because they hadn't released by the time I finished the first 4 episodes. The reason why I think it's pretty much objectively wrong to say that you can just start from the new one is because even though the new one does give its own stories with Daredevil that doesn't have immediate connection to the previous seasons, the major plot, at least for the beginning of the new season, is basically entirely based on the old seasons, and details from 2 other shows which I'll mention soon. The important catalyst for the story in Born Again is the massacre at Josie's bar, which includes the death of Matthew's best friend, Foggy, at the hands of Bullseye, which was so brutal that it caused Matthew to stop being Daredevil because of it. Which quite literally doesn't make any sense if you're a new viewer like me, who at the moment at least didn't watch the original series. To me, it looked like some random event that happened for literally no reason. Of course, I at least had the brain cells to guess that this guy was probably from an older season coming to finish some unsettled beef with Daredevil. But besides that, I didn't know anything. I felt like I was watching a show from its 4th season. Yes, I totally knew that from a gut feeling. I guess I'm just built different or something. And after that, the entire season is based off this event, which made it weird as hell since I don't know why Bullseye did what he did besides being crazy. So I decided to watch the old seasons and come back. And through some sort of miracle, after watching the original series, it made even less sense than it did originally. Okay, for this to make sense, I gotta recap season 3 quickly. Basically, after manipulating the FBI to get him out of prison, the Kingpin convinced a dude named Bullseye to work for him because of his talent for, well, hitting a bullseye with pretty much any object. Anyways, Fisk knew he was a useful weapon, but also a mentally unstable individual, which actually works in Fisk's benefit, since he can mold his malleable mind however he wants to do his orders. Go kill that guy, go kill this guy, you get the deal. So he wanted to make sure he had complete control over him. So when he noticed Bullseye's crush was getting closer to him as an influence, he had to kill. Which Bullseye had no idea about because obviously if he did, he would crash out. But that changed at the end of the season because Daredevil snitched about it, which caused Bullseye to go after Fisk. Then for whatever reason, Daredevil, being the great guy he is, stops him from doing so. Even though he's the one who revealed to Bullseye that Fisk had his crush killed full well knowing he's a mentally unstable serial killer. Whatever, that's season 3. And after knowing all that, it makes even less sense since instead of going after Fisk, aka the guy who killed his crush, he instead went after Daredevil? After the events of season 3, Bullseye quite literally had no reason to go after Daredevil. The only offense Daredevil committed against Bullseye was getting in the way of his vengeance against Fisk. In all cases, Fisk should still be the #1 target regardless. And he's straight up out of prison recovering from some shot in the head apparently. So like, there's gotta be an explanation, right? So at the end of the Born Again season 1, they give one. The reason why Bullseye did what he did is because Fisk's spouse, Vanessa, ordered him to kill Foggy. Why? Well, once again, you're just gonna have to stick with me here. Because after Fisk had apparently again got out of prison after season 3, and then randomly got injured by something they haven't clarified yet, which I'm guessing is the headshot he received in Hawkeye. Okay, you know that pretty important tidbit that I'll explain later? Well, here it is, I guess. I'm now noticing this deep into the script that it's actually clarified in the show Echo, which I initially thought was the other name for the show Hawkeye, simply because the name of the girl in the show Hawkeye was Echo, and the show Hawkeye is more about her than actually Hawkeye. I guess he'll pretty much always be the Yamcha of the Avengers, even in his own show. But no, the Hawkeye show is the prequel of the entirely independent show Echo, alright? So that gave me a bit of a stroke. But moving on, in this show it's clarified what happened to Fisk after the gunshot in Hawkeye. But before I tell you exactly what happened, let's play a game of guess what happened. I'm going to show you some footage and give you 4 options. Pick the one that explains his miraculous survival after being shot in the head.
You and I were family. Family.
Sometimes family doesn't see eye to eye.
Right, so option 1. Even though she was holding the gun firmly pointing at his face, the moment the camera shifted up, she instantly flicked the gun and shot him somewhere else for whatever reason. Option 2. She shot him in the eye. Option 3. She shot at the side of Fisk's face where it only grazed his face, but also knocked his scary ass out onto the cold pavement. Option 4. His fat ass actually ate the bullet. I'll give you 5 seconds to choose your answer starting now. If you chose option 4, you'd be wrong. Would have been pretty funny though. But I mean, if you're not going by the literal definition, it's kind of right because he actually got shot in the head. More specifically option 2. He got shot in the eye. Because apparently that's the safest spot to be shot at in the human body. I guess these obviously medically certified writers from Echo think that the eye, probably the softest organ in the body besides the brain, somehow would shield the bullet from reaching his brain. Him unironically eating the bullet probably would have been a better explanation. You know what, I'm actually done researching this shit. I straight up don't even care. Let's get back on track and wrap this up. Yeah, so as Fisk was casually recovering from a headshot in the hospital, Vanessa basically took over Fisk's spot of influence in the crime world and basically is the new kingpin, or queenpin, or whatever you want to call it. So naturally, when Foggy basically had a case that would expose her business, which for some reason doesn't involve Matthew or Paige, even though they're basically Team Rocket, the three pretty much do all of their work together when they're on good terms with each other, which we've clearly seen is the case in the beginning. She made a deal with Bullseye to kill Foggy to prevent him from exposing her. And now this sounds sound on paper, but the thing is, at least to me, it just keeps leading into other questions instead of feeling like a proper cohesive plot. Like, okay, she's the reason why it happened. Now, why was she trying to cover it up? Because she's the kingpin and wanted to cover it up. Wait, why is she the kingpin? Because Fisk was injured. Why was he injured? He got shot in the head in another show nobody cares about. Now, how the hell isn't he dead? I don't know. But more importantly, why was he not in prison in the first place like he's supposed to be instead of being shot in a random different TV show? I don't know. And I'm sorry, the tiny detail of him breaking out again is not something you can skip over just because he probably can. Obviously, Daredevil would have immediately gotten involved again. But I guess I must be tripping because clearly the writers think the man that has dedicated 2 entire different seasons of sending Fisk to prison would just ignore it, I guess. But even saying that is the case, without question they still should have clarified this more if that's what they're running with. The thing that makes this so annoying is that it basically means that season 1 and 3, so basically everything Daredevil has done is genuinely just meaningless, which I guess canonically is the case. Meanwhile, the few friends and allies of Matthew has dwindled, and no, not just minor characters like the sweet old Hispanic lady who got murdered. No, Ben, the priest, Foggy were all brutally killed, while some unimportant characters like the nurse and the mom are just gone, I guess. The only ones actually left from the old series in Born Again are Karen and the Punisher. If he had simply let Bullseye take care of Vanessa and Fisk, Foggy would have still been alive. Yet after all that, at the end an actually miraculous thing happened, where after some events, Bullseye went after Fisk again and actually shot him and ended the series. Yeah, I don't know why I'm even doing this. We both know that did not happen. But even though that hypothetical ending is pretty anticlimactic, what actually happened is diabolical. Our boy Daredevil, being the prudent man he is, that always learns from his mistakes that are so severe that it straight up costed the lives of the people who he holds most dear, decided to stop Bullseye from killing Fisk again. Now that alone is already horrendous, considering all of what I just said. But the worst part about this isn't that he decided to stop Bullseye. It's the manner in which he stopped him. You see, I wasn't lying when I said Bullseye took a shot at Fisk. No, Daredevil didn't somehow stop him in a fight, or somehow distract him from firing, or even deflect the bullet midair. No, he blocked the shot with his own fucking body, bro. On some actual "get down, Mr. President" as timing. Look, Matthew, I get that he's the mayor. That's dandy and all, but like, isn't he also your primary sworn enemy? Yeah, I just can't watch this shit anymore, bro. The only advice, which to be honest is just personal preference I can give, is that they really should have stopped using Fisk. They should have retired him earlier on and given Daredevil a new villain that's his own, not effing Spider-Man's. I know that's probably the biggest hot take I've given considering how good of a villain he is, and there's no chance the writers are even gonna consider killing him off as long as Daredevil continues. But to me personally, Daredevil's tone just doesn't fit well with the Joker and Batman sort of dynamic, where they keep fighting each other over and over again till the end of time. Fisk should have been taken down permanently in the first season and left there. Him coming back after being shot in the head like he's William Afton or something just feels too cartoony, and implies all the work Matthew has done in the previous seasons is obsolete. Which yeah, the show basically confirms it is. Either way, even though I've accidentally spent a good portion of the video complaining about the show and the things I don't like probably more than the stuff I do like, I actually did enjoy the show. In fact, the reason why I'm ranting so much about its imperfections is because if it didn't have those, it probably would have been a Hall of Famer like The Penguin. It's a great show, but not quite fully a masterpiece. Kind of reminds me of the video I made on video games that suffer from the same problem. Either way, I just wanted to talk about the show. So that's about it, and if you actually sat through all the stuff I just rambled on about, I really appreciate that, thank you. I suggest you should watch Daredevil if you're somehow still interested after all the spoilers. Maybe just skip season 2 though. Except the Punisher stuff in the beginning, that's top tier Daredevil, you can't miss it. But besides that, thank you again for watching, and see you next time.